Here is the brutal reality. You take $10,000, you put it into the market today, specifically targeting dividends. Does that money actually change your life? Or when you strip away all the YouTube hype and just run the raw math, is it barely enough to cover, a Netflix subscription and maybe a cheap sandwich?
That is the friction point, isn't it? Because you've got one camp just screaming that dividends are the path to immediate freedom, and then the other camp is claiming they're just, irrelevant, tax-inefficient noise that actually keeps you poor.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are dismantling the mechanics of dividend income. We aren't just looking at yield, we're looking at the mathematical utility of a $10,000 investment. We are looking at what that money actually does.
And the core disagreement here really boils down to income now versus income later. I mean, do you squeeze the lemon today for cash, or do you plant the seeds for an orchard in 20 years? Because the source material we're analyzing today makes it very clear you cannot have both at the same time.
I'll plant my flag immediately. I argue that $10,000 is just a seed. If you try to harvest it for income right now, chasing high yield, you effectively kill the compounding engine. Real wealth, the kind that actually replaces a salary, only comes from low-yield, high-quality growth over decades.
Now, I just fundamentally disagree with that all-or-nothing approach. Dismissing the utility of current yield is, frankly, a privilege. $10,000 might not be a salary, but there is a massive economic difference between a portfolio that generates $16 a month and one that generates $50. I'm arguing for the utility of yield and really the time value of money.
Then let's look at the long-term compounder argument first. Because the math here is, it's pretty sobering for anyone who thinks they're going to quit their 9-to-5 next week. If you buy a standard high-quality dividend portfolio, what the analysis calls bucket B, you're looking at maybe a 3% yield.
Which is the standard for the dividend aristocrats, the boring, stable companies.
Boring, stable, and low yield. Do the math on that. $10,000 times 3% is $300 a year. That breaks down to exactly $25 a month.
It's not exactly quit your job money.
It's barely take a friend to Chipotle money. I mean, this is where the fantasy just completely breaks down. If your strategy is based on immediate cash flow, seeing $25 hit your brokerage account once a month it's demoralizing. You look at that number and think, I locked up 10 grand for this?
I agree that $25 is negligible. It feels like a rounding error. But that is exactly why I advocate for the income now approach. You're purposefully limiting the investor to the lowest yield bucket in your example. If we look at bucket C, the high yield space discussed in the material, we're talking 6 to 8%.
Which comes with significantly higher risk of capital loss.
Risk, yes, but also return. A 6% yield on that same $10,000 isn't $25 a month, it's $50 a month. That's $600 a year. Now pause before you dismiss it as lunch money. $50 a month pays a utility bill. It can fill a gas tank. It is a tangible return on capital that affects your personal P&L today.
It affects your wallet today, but it destroys your net worth tomorrow. This is what I call the high yield trap. To get that $50 a month, you are sacrificing the single most powerful force in finance, capital appreciation. You're prioritizing the egg over the goose.
You're assuming high yield automatically equals zero growth or a dead company.
I'm assuming high yield usually signals distress, or at best, capped upside. Let's break down the compounding engine outlined in the source. The data shows that if you take a total return approach, let's say 8% annually, combining price growth and dividends, that $10,000 doesn't just pay you rent. Over 30 years, it becomes roughly $100,000, $600. That is a 10x multiplier.
In the year 2055?
Yes, that is investing. You are buying a share of a business that grows. If you chase the 6 or 8% yield now, you are often buying companies that are stagnant. They pay you $50 a month to keep you interested, but the share price stays flat or it drops. You get your gas money, but you miss out on the $100,000 pot of gold because you couldn't wait.
See, this is where the total return crowd loses the room. You are asking for 30 years of discipline with almost no feedback loop. If an investor sees $16.67 hit their account, which is the bucket A scenario, it just feels like the machine is broken.
It isn't broken, it's working silently. It's growing underground.
Silence is hard to maintain for 3 decades. But if I see $50 hitting the account every month, that is positive reinforcement. And here's the nuance you're missing. The compounding machine works for high yield too. If I take that $50 and reinvest it, manually buying more shares, I am accumulating ownership faster than the guy only getting 16.
You're accumulating ownership in a sinking ship. We have to talk about the mechanics of why yields get high. This is the yield trap concept, and we need to be technical about it so listeners really understand the danger.
The denominator effect.
Exactly. Yield is a simple fraction, the annual dividend divided by the stock price. If a company is failing, earnings are down, debt is up, lawsuits are pending, investors sell the stock, the price crashes.
And as the price drops, the mathematical yield rises.
Precisely. If a stock was $100 paying $5, that's a 5% yield. If the stock crashes to $50 because the business is in trouble but they haven't cut the dividend yet, suddenly the screen shows a 10% yield. You see that and think, wow, what a generous company. No, the market is screaming that the company is dying. It's a warning sign, not a gift.
Okay, I grant you bucket D, the 10 to 12% yielders that are basically distressed assets. That is catching a falling knife. Buying a company strictly because the chart looks broken is, well, it's financial suicide. But you're conflating bucket C with bucket D.
Bucket C is often just a waiting room for bucket D.
I disagree. There are legitimate business development companies, BDCs, real estate investment trusts, REITs, or covered call ETFs paying 8% that aren't dying. They are structurally designed to pass through cash. They are required by law to pay out 90% of their taxable income.
But they have capped upside. A covered call strategy literally sells away the upside potential in exchange for that premium.
Maybe, but if my goal is cash flow, I accept capped upside. I don't need the stock to double if it pays me my 8% rent checks consistently. The fear of yield traps shouldn't scare an investor into a 1% yield where their money just dies to inflation.
That brings us to the second pillar of this breakdown, inflation versus growth. You like your $50 today, but money today is worth less tomorrow.
Inflation affects all strategies. It eats your 3% yield just as fast as my 8%.
It hurts fixed income strategies the most. If you lock in a high-yield stock that doesn't grow its payout, which is typical for those BDCs and covered calls, you get $50 a month forever. In 10 years, that $50 buys a sandwich, not a tank of gas. Compare that to strategy B, dividend growth.
The raise strategy.
Right. You start with a lower yield, say $300 a year, but the company raises the dividend 5 to 8% annually because their profits are growing. In 10 years, your income has nearly doubled to roughly $488 purely on organic growth. You've preserved your purchasing power. The quality bucket protects your future lifestyle.
But look at the timeline gap. This is the time value of money argument. You are waiting 10 years for your income to hit 488. I started at 600 on day one.
You're ignoring the crossover point where my income exceeds yours.
I'm looking at the area under the curve. Even if my income stays flat at 600, I've collected significantly more cash in the first decade than you have. You're betting on the future, I'm collecting in the present. In a volatile market, cash in hand is the only thing that's real. Paper gains, that stock price appreciation you love so much, that can vanish in a recession. My dividend check clears.
That is a psychological safety blanket, not a wealth maximization strategy. You're prioritizing the feeling of safety over the reality of asset growth.
I'm prioritizing liquidity. And let's talk about market environments. Your strategy relies heavily on bull market.
It relies on American business growth.
Which usually happens, but not always. What about the lost decade? If the S&P 500 trades sideways for 10 years, which has happened, your total return strategy stalls out. You have no price appreciation and a tiny 2% dividend. I, however, in my high-yield strategy, have collected 60 to 80% of my initial investment back in cash over that decade, regardless of the stock price.
But you're assuming your high-yield principal stays intact. In a flat or recessionary market, high-yield assets often suffer the most. When liquidity dries up, those BDCs and high-leverage income plays get crushed. You might get your 8% yield, but if your principal drops 40%, you're still losing.
And if your growth stocks drop 40% because their PE ratios compress, you are also losing, but you don't even have the cash flow to show for it.
I have the increasing share count from reinvesting at lower prices into high-quality companies that will survive. That is the difference. I own the survivors. You own the mercenaries.
A harsh characterization. But let's ground this. We're throwing percentages around. Let's get real about what that liquidity actually amounts to. The analysis poses a question. What does it actually take to live off this?
The reality check. Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Because both of our arguments regarding $10,000 are somewhat academic until we look at the scale required to actually live.
To generate just $1,000 a month, which is poverty line income in many places, investing in my preferred safe 3% bucket requires $400,000 in capital.
And in my 6% bucket, it requires $200,000.
Exactly. Both require hundreds of thousands of dollars. This proves my core thesis. $10,000 is irrelevant as an income source. It cannot pay your bills. It literally cannot do what you want it to do. So why optimize for the $50 payout? It doesn't change your life. The only logical move for small sums is to focus on the 30-year multiplier, turning 10K into 100K, so you eventually have that $400,000.
I think you're viewing $10,000 as a destination rather than a tool.
It's a seed.
It's a lever. Cash flow provides options. You say $50 doesn't change a life? $50 a month covers a gym membership that keeps you healthy. It buys a book a month that teaches you a new skill. Or, purely financially, it allows you to dollar cost average into other positions without touching your salary.
You're talking about velocity of money now.
Yes, the income pragmatist asks, how can this asset serve me today? If I can get an 8% return now, I can deploy that capital into other opportunities. You're locking your capital away in a vault for 30 years, trusting a CEO to allocate it for you.
I trust a CEO of a dividend king to allocate capital better than the average retail investor, yes. That's why they're kings. Retained earnings drive share prices. And you're forgetting the silent killer, taxes.
I wondered when the tax man would show up.
Every time you take that $50 dividend, the IRS takes a bite. It's ordinary income or qualified dividends, but it is taxed now. My growth compounds tax-deferred in the share price until I choose to sell. Your velocity of money is leaking oil every time you get a check.
Taxes are a fair point. But, taxes are a high-class problem. I'd rather pay taxes on income I received than have zero taxes on a stock that dropped 20%. And honestly, in a tax-advantaged account like an IRA, that point is moot.
Fair. In an IRA, the math changes. But we're talking about the mechanics of the assets themselves. Let's look at the 10-year simulation from the analysis. This, I think, settles the growth versus yield debate with hard numbers.
Walk us through it.
Year 10. In the total return model, dividends reinvested plus price growth. Your $10,000 is worth roughly $21,500. You've more than doubled your money.
In a bull market scenario?
In an average historical market scenario. In your high yield scenario, assuming no price growth because you chased yield and ignored quality, you've collected about $6,000 in cash. Your total value is $16,000. My $21,500 beats your $16,000. The math wins.
But look at the composition of that wealth. That $16,000 consists of $10,000 in the stock and $6,000 in my pocket. If the market crashes 50% tomorrow...
Oh, here comes the doomsday prep.
It's not doomsday, it's risk management. If the market crashes 50%, my $6,000 in cash is safe. It's uncorrelated. Your $21,500 is entirely exposed to the market. It evaporates into $10,750. I've de-risked the trade. You are fully exposed.
You call it de-risking. I call it capping your potential. You're betting against the economy's ability to recover. My $21,500 might drop, but I own more shares of a growing company. When the recovery happens, I rocket past you again.
When the recovery happens. Again, tell that to the guy who retired in 2000 or 1966. Sequence of returns matters. Cash flow mitigates sequence risk.
We're debating edge cases now. For the average person starting with $10,000, the probability of 30 years of growth is higher than the probability of 30 years of stagnation.
I'll concede that probability favors growth, but psychology favors cash.
And that is the crux of it. It comes down to the final question the analysis asks. Do you prefer strategy A or strategy B?
Strategy A. Higher income now, I want the soldier to send checks home.
And strategy B. Lower income now, faster growth. I want the soldier to recruit an army.
I think we have to admit that for the beginner with $10,000, neither of us is right in the sense that they can retire.
Agreed. The $10,000 is the entry fee.
But the danger is the extremes. Thinking 10K makes you rich is a delusion, but thinking 10K is useless is just cynicism.
The middle ground is knowing which game you're playing. If you're in the high-yield bucket, you need to watch those positions like a hawk for dividend cuts. It's an active sport. You cannot just set and forget a 9% yield.
Absolutely. And if you're in the growth bucket, you need the stomach to ignore the market for a decade. You need the discipline to not sell when the yield looks pathetic compared to a savings account.
Precisely. There is no free lunch in finance, just different ways to pay the bill. You either pay with risk or you pay with time.
I prefer to pay with risk. I trust my ability to navigate the market and use the cash.
And I prefer to pay with time. I trust the compounding power of high-quality businesses. That is the fundamental divide.
And hopefully, we've helped you figure out which currency you want to spend.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to The Debate. Check your portfolio, check your strategy, and be honest about what you are trying to build. We'll see you next time.